One morning I woke up and I knew a new day, a new way, and new eyes belong. Lord, the way of the mind get gone.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, and thanks to everyone who's traveled long distances to be here. It means more than we can possibly convey that everybody's come out today. So my sister and I are going to get us started here, and we'll be kind of splicing in as we go. We have a program for you. There are pamphlets in the back if you haven't grabbed one already. Also in the back, we have a guest book for everybody to sign. So again, thank you for being here. And my sister's going to say a few words to get us started.
The award for longest distance goes to Rose from Nicaragua, so she gets extra gold stars. And we're going to start with Michael Burrell. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's going to say a few words, and we'll go from there.
There's a standing joke. And the standing joke is, if you take a look at my daughter, she doesn't look anything like her mom. And the thing is, if people say that to her, she's going to, well, it's figurative, because I don't think we'd make it out of here if it was real. But she will say, okay, you need to take a shot at tequila for saying that. Because she gets very tired of people making her look, saying that she looks like her mom. And then the second thing is that I go a step further with her, because we have the kind of relationship where we can tease each other pretty badly, and she usually wins. But she ran a 10.7 mile race last weekend when she flew in from Chicago. She landed on Friday, ran a race at Lake San Antonio that was 10.7 miles over hill and dale when it was 89 degrees outside, and it was the first race she's ever run. And if you look over here, you're going to see what her mom did. And so, of course, what am I going to say? Not only do you look like your mom, but you're starting to act like your mom. So now I kind of want to say here, first of all, thanks to everybody. And this is a testimony about Shel. And the testimony is that if you look at all the different communities of people that are within this group, and I mean, for me, it was like standing at the door. Well, the people from the placement office are sitting over here. The people from vocal arts and the master chorale are sitting up in front. And the people that are from the different staffs, like the junior high and Oak Hills and other places, are sitting in these tables. You can see how many communities she touched, and that's the hard part for me. So I'm going to take after my cousin, although he went a step further. He said, when he gave the eulogy for his dad a couple of years ago, he said, I got a box of Kleenex here and 20 jokes. He had them lined up. And he says, when I get to the point where I can't talk anymore, I'm going to blow my nose, and then I'm going to tell a joke. I'm not going to go that far, but I will try to tell some jokes so that I can get myself composed again when I get into this. I will say that some of the stuff that you see when you walk around, and this is not going to be the kind of celebration where I'm going to pass the mic, because every one of you out here could say something about Shel, about how you know her and how she affected you. So we would be here and never eat, which I know that's a priority, or never have the wine, or never have any other stuff, because people would be passing the mic for everyone. So we're not doing that. We're going to have just a few speakers, and we're going to let people visit with each other. It's mostly a concert. But I want to say that Shel had a quiet way of living, and I like to think of it as kind of being an ironic way of living. And you'll kind of see that when you see the movie that my sister-in-law made, Nanette, who's around here somewhere. I'll introduce her again. I'll embarrass her more a little later. But she was a person who kind of stayed in the background and never liked crowds. She would have wanted to get out of a place like this because there's too many people. And after concerts, a lot of times, she would be the first one to say to me, and I'd want to go backstage and shake hands with the musicians and tell them how good their concert was. And she would say, Mike, we got to get out of here. And I would say, well, I'm going to go in. And she says, fine, you go in and say goodbye to everybody and talk to them, but I'm going to be outside. And she really was that way, but in an individual way, she had a way of kind of insinuating herself into people's minds. And that's why you see this group of people here. So the ironic part of the way she lived, the way I saw it is that it's exemplified by a story she told me. And actually people in her family, I think, told me this too. That Shel went out, and because where they lived in El Monte, they had an area where they had all kinds of plants growing. They had a possum that lived in an old cabinet that was outside. They had vines that took over the whole yard, and there was a lot of nature in the yard. And so she went out to sing to the bees one day, and I can just imagine her, because when she got in a good mood around the house, she'd bip around and she would sing things like hymn tunes. She had a mind for that stuff, and she would go to church with her friends sometimes and hear hymn tunes, and they would stay in her head. And then she would, musicals were the same way. So if we went on long trips, I got hymn tunes and I got musicals. And I'd say, dear, you really have to start singing some other stuff because you're driving me nuts with this. But she went out to sing to the bees and she got stung. And she was totally affronted by this. Here I am trying to be nice to the bees and they sting me. And that's kind of what her life was like in a lot of ways, because she'd be out jogging, and for those of you who really know her, know that her mom passed away with ALS, and we'd go down every month to help. And she swore that she was going to keep herself in good enough shape so that she wouldn't end up like that. And even though she was paralyzed, it was the kind of thing that it was different, because her mom, the end game, you knew what was going to happen with that over time. With Shel, not necessarily. She was what she was, and she lasted a long time living the way she lived, and it was fine. Her last 2 years were great years. But anyway, that was ironic. She'd go out and exercise, and she burst her appendix running. And so she was in surgeries for this kind of stuff. It's like everything that you can think of that would go contrary to her trying to fix herself so that she wouldn't end up like her mom, in a way kind of went the opposite way. But that didn't stop her. She still did stuff. So the thing is, I don't know that, she had a lot of surgeries. She had the kind of body that made adhesions. In fact, I'm going to embarrass my daughter. Where is she? After she burst her appendix, we didn't think we could have any more kids, and you were a surprise, dear. And furthermore about that, you've been a joy, but you still were a surprise. And I can tell you within 2 weeks, I was in getting fixed. And what was even, and what was even better about that is that I had people say, but you're pretty young. What are you doing that for? I said, because we're done. We are done. And of course, for the first 6 years, it was either her or me. And then after she turned about 6, she decided she wanted our approval more than direct confrontation. But she was a person with directly confrontational, which Lindsay wasn't. Lindsay was passive aggressive, but he was not directly confrontational. But no, Keisha would absolutely pull records out of our record cabinet, and we had hundreds of records, and she'd be pulling them out, and I'd say no to her. Her head would snap around and look me in the eye, and she'd reach over and start pulling out. So the blood pressure, just like that. But at age 6, things changed, and she really tried to please us after that, which was good. Now, we've talked about the claustrophobia. What I'd like to talk a little bit about is that she really took care of people. I don't know, I have to have a show of hands from the family. How many people lived with us for a while from the family? Okay, so she was there for the family, and she was there for the staff. And there's some illustrious people sitting over here from the staff, from the career services. But there's one story she told me. She really worked for her staff. And What joke can I tell? She learned, yeah, look at Keisha. She learned almost every position in the office, so that when people were gone or were short, she could step in and do all the jobs. To me, that's a good manager, if you're a person that can step in and do any job and fill in for somebody if they're not there. But I remember one time she came and told me, she goes, we had a serious session, just this last week. And she goes, they were getting ready to promote a new director of career services. And she goes, and I was at the meeting when the president was up, and he had a list of names. And I could see the light shining through, and I could see the list of the names who were there. And it wasn't the person we wanted. So he said, I had to make a speech where I was emphatic about the person that the office wanted to be the new director. And she went out. The president listened to her. She took care of the students who talked to her. And back there are some binders that are from people who sent cards for her first heart attack, which was a year ago, December. And then this last one in October, and then Christmas time, people sent lots of cards. Well, I've put all those cards in binders because I'm not passing around a microphone. But if you want to see some of the stuff that people wrote about Shel, we have many people who are adults, who are in the teaching profession now, who are doing other things now, who remember talking to her about stuff. And she cared about the people she talked to. Some of you received letters from her because she was a letter writer. And when she wrote letters, they were tomes. I mean, if we could accumulate all those letters and put them into some sort of a binder, she could almost have a book. Because when she wrote a letter, it was usually a long letter. And some people, and she didn't get to everybody because she took time with her letters. And she would handwrite them. She wouldn't type them on the computer. She had lots of interests. I mean, she took up watercolor, so she had some of her watercolors over there. She was a musician, and you can see that by the choir we have here. We have 44 voices or more. People from the vocal arts ensemble, and I got to hand it to Gary. He, without a doubt, kept her going by insisting that she would sing with the vocal arts ensemble. And that was huge. But some of her interests, she took up watercolor. There's some of her quilts that are over here that you can look. She sewed a lot. She was in a quilt co-op for a while, and people would have to go home with these packets with all the cutouts. Everything was cut out, and then it was their job to put it together and then show up at the next meeting with their squares done. And when all the squares were done for a person, then that person is their responsibility to put the whole quilt together. And there were a lot of quilts that were done that way. And Lindsay's got one that she was really creative, that was one with musical instruments that she did that was really fantastic. And it was in the colors of the one that's back on the table back there. It was done in those kind of colors, lots of reds and browns. And she and her sister, well, her whole family, but she and Lori are amazing at their artistic ability with quilts, just absolutely. And well, there's so many people. I mean, there's Leslie, a whole bunch of people are really skilled at that kind of stuff. So that was one of her hobbies. And then, of course, exercise. There was no exercise that was too much for her. And she pounded people into the ground with her exercising. And this can lead to a funny story. For me, it finally got to the point for me, well, let's go hike Half Dome. Let's go hike this, let's go hike that. And I would say, dear, I'm here to smell the flowers. You do it. I'm going to take my time and take pictures. I'll take pictures and I'll get you on the way back. And then there were other times when she would go and she'd get the kids, and the kids were great because they would go with her. And she would take them out, and after about 2 or 3 hikes, they got the message, and they go, Mom, and I think this is mostly Keisha. I don't know, Lizzie, you never complained about this too much, did you? But Keisha would put it to her, go, Mom, do you have a map? Okay. Do we have food? Are we going to stop and eat? Are we going to be back before dark? You know, I mean, and there were times that didn't happen, you know, and so the kids would put her through the 3rd degree before the hiking part would go. And there was Gail would hike, there were other people in the family that would hike, David, they would all backpack, and I always said, I'll stay home with the baby. I'll be glad to stay home with the baby. I'm not doing this stuff. There are too many big mosquitoes out there with Carol Kirsten and all these people that would go off and hike. And then, of course, after the paralysis, there were There were a lot of people who entered our lives. If you are a caretaker of Shel, please stand up. And there were family members, I don't think who stood up, who should have, because they were caretakers too. And we couldn't have done all this without all the help. Well, we lived kind of a different lifestyle in terms of our personal lives. Shel was a morning person. Getting up at 5 or 6 was okay with her, especially if we're out camping. If we're out camping, 5 or 6 are great. You get to see the sun come up. This is great. Me, Mike, you got to get up and see the sunrise. And I go, the what? There is a sun in the morning? You know, it's one of those things that I'm a night owl. And those of you that know me, you see me online sometimes, I'm up to the wee hours. 1, 2 in the morning is normal for me. And then I sleep in, and I don't want to get up early in the morning. So we were passing ships in the night sometimes about what we do, and I had to compromise a few times in the Grand Canyon. She goes, Mike, you've got to get up with me and see the sunrise over the Grand Canyon. Dear, this one time I will do that. And so this was it. And our lives are great. I have no we had a great life. In spite of the hardships, our life was great. The last 2 years were great. And even after the heart attack, and actually I think it mellowed Shel out a little bit, the heart attack, because when we've all the family and everybody have talked about this and the close friends, we've talked about how she was after her first heart attack, and we thought she was done. She was on life support. We didn't think that she was going to pull out of this. We thought she had too much loss of oxygen in her brain. But pretty soon she was making movements like this. And people in the family remember seeing her like this, and her eyes were going around like a baby, just taking everything in. And Lisa, who was one of the caretakers, was there, and she said her first word. I mean, finally they pulled the tube, and they said, we can't keep her in ICU anymore. And they pulled the tube, and she breathed. She breathed on her own. So then we were faced with hospice for a while, because nobody still knew how good her brain was. And Lisa was there when she said her first words. And then Pete and Nanette and my brother and sister-in-law came up, and other people came up and heard her first words. But I've got to tell a funny story about Nanette. Nanette, and this is my sister-in-law who did a lot of caretaking, was up here a lot, was in to visit. They came up after she had been moved to, it was hospice at that time. And Shel was talking a little bit. And Lisa heard the first word. I mean, and we were astounded. Keisha and I were home, and Lisa was supposed to pick us up, and we were supposed to go to the hospital and see Shel. And they went right to the hospital. She went right to the hospital and didn't stop by our house. And so when we got this phone call, and it was Lisa on the phone, she goes, Shel's talking. And I go, no. You must be extrapolating things from her movements or something. She's not talking. And it turned out that Will, her husband, who's back there too, he was on the phone with my daughter at the same time. And so I went into Keisha and I said, are you hearing this? Lisa says Shel's talking. And Keisha says, yeah, I'm talking to Will. He's saying the same thing. I said, we got to go. So we hung up and went in, and we walked into the room, and Lisa was there. And Shel goes, hi, Keisha. She goes, hi, Mike. And we were floored because she hadn't shown any kind of sign of coming out of that. So from that time on, then it was a battle because, okay, how well can she take care of herself at home? Because I couldn't take care of her 24 hours a day. And we had lots of help, but still. So I'm arranging all these financial things and doing all this stuff, trying to see where we can have her and still have her so that she feels like she's part of a family and things are going on. And she's improving all the time. And it finally got down to the point we were having one last big meeting. And this was a meeting with all the hospice doctors and the family and everybody to talk over whether she could go home or not. And we'd had a meeting like that before, and she wasn't ready to go home at that time. We couldn't have brought her home. She was still too dependent on things. So we had this final meeting, and my brother Pete and the people and Gary and Gail who were there a lot, they could see that she would read the captions on them. She was watching the TV that was up with closed captions. And so I said, okay, this is my test. And so I pulled down a Laura Ingalls Wilder's book, which was an autobiography. And it's in little print. It's like what I have on this speech, little print. And I put it out in front of Shel, and I said, I just want to see where she is. And I put it down. I said, okay, would you read that paragraph? And there was no response. And so I watched her for about 15, 20 seconds, and I go, Shel, would you please read me those paragraphs out loud? And she starts reading the paragraphs, and I'm just going, uh-oh. She was exactly following my directions, exactly. So I said, she's back. She's back. She's going to be able to come home. There's no problem with this. So we had the big meeting. And February the 1st of last year, she came home. And here's the interesting part for all of you that are out there listening. She never, ever felt pain during any of all these things that happened. When she had her heart attack, and she was shocked 3 times to bring her back, if we asked her about that, she had no memory. And if you talk to anyone in the family or anybody who visited with her, why am I in here? Mike, can I stand up? I mean, this is how much her memory was gone at that time. She had no memory, and we'd ask her, do you feel comfortable? Yes, I'm comfortable. Do you hurt? No, I don't hurt. And so the lesson to me was, when we see all this and somebody goes through a near-death experience like this, is that really, I think, in a way, your body shuts down in a way that it's comforting to the person. I mean, it's not comforting to the family and everybody who's standing outside looking at this. But she really didn't remember anything. She didn't remember any pain. She didn't remember any kind of things that were going on. It was all a big blur. And she made us tell the stories of all the things that had happened to her, because she didn't have any recollection of any of it. Well, you did this. You were like this. You were making these hand motions. And she was incredulous. She was absolutely incredulous about all this, and we'd tell her the stories. Her brother Ted came out, and we took her out and around, and Lisa and Will came, and we took her out and around, and Darryl came, and some of our friends came, and we took her out and before she came home, and took her to Avila Beach and got an ice cream cone, this kind of stuff. And when we asked her about that, after she got home, she had no memory of it, because she was still recovering from all of this. And from that time on, I saw a change in Shel where she was mellowed out. She enjoyed her time with people. We went around and saw everybody. She sang. She did all the stuff. And she was not nearly as intense. And I guess the final thing I'll say about before I turn this over, because I've talked for a long time already, is that there was some comfort in a way about what happened in October. And the comfort is that she mentioned to Sandy and to maybe Gail, and she said it to, there was one other person she talked to, Annette, yes, Nanette, that she could relax now. She goes, I'm not worried anymore. Keisha's okay, because she's in Chicago now. And Shel put up a stink about that at the beginning. She goes, you're moving, you're looking for jobs away from here? How am I going to ever see you? And Keisha goes, Mom, I've got to find a place where I can go to work. I can't get a job here. Now that it's going to pay, I got to put my degree to work. I got to do something. And we saw how she was flying off and doing these interviews, and it was one of those stories where you always come in second place. You do a good interview and everything's positive, but then you don't get the call. So finally she gets this job in Chicago, and she's working for a third-party logistics company. And she knew Lindsay was okay. Lindsay has a lot to do with a lot of the wines are back here. He works at, for all those of you, and this is a commercial, I hope you don't mind, Schramsberg Vineyards up north in Napa is where Lindsay works. And he's a wine guy. I mean, if his wines aren't cheap, but they're good. And he leads tours. I mean, he's in wine education is really what he does. And then Keisha got this job with a third-party logistics company, which means you take stuff from producers and you take it to consumers, and they arrange all the shipping. And this is big stuff, like big trucks and trains and all this other kind of stuff. So she's back in Chicago. When Shel saw how determined she was to look for a job, she accepted it. She passed the night Keisha left. But she was okay with it. She was okay because she realized that Lindsay was okay and that Keisha now had a job and she was okay, so she could let go. So who knows what goes on in a person's mind, you know, where maybe a heart incident happened, but there was that step where you don't have to fight anymore. And that's how I look at this. So I can't thank you all enough for coming. This is a wonderful group. I want to thank the Vocal Arts Ensemble and Gary and the Master Chorale for and our wonderful string quartet, or string trio and string and flute trio that played. Nancy, would you stand up, please? And we have Miriam and our very close friend, Carol Kirsten. Thank you so much for playing today. And I want to thank all of you. What a great group of people, and it couldn't be any better. It is crowded. Hopefully everybody's found at least a place to kind of perch on. And of course, the food's back there. I will caution you, our dog is here. Please do not feed our dog. $1,200 last month because she was eating the wrong kind of food. It was too fat. So I want to thank you again for coming, and we'll get on with our program.
The sky is clearing.